and a presentation at a public hearing as part of this meeting, not necessarily in that order. It is being recorded and it is being streamed online. I'll run through the roll call. Bill Santos, I'm here. Mike Wiedemer.
Here.
Sam Trapani.
Here.
Andrew Hollister. Orlando Rivera.
Here.
Dave Watson.
Here.
Robert Barley.
Here.
Andre Evans. Legislator Hebert. Legislator Barnhart. Jeff McCann. Adrian Green. Amy Grower. Laura Smith.
Here.
Robert Franklin.
Here.
Josette Mangieri.
Here.
Richard Tantalo. Christina Doherty.
Here.
Mike Garland. And Sean Murphy.
Here.
Great, thank you. Rochelle, would you like to introduce staff?
Kim and Shen from County Planning are here, and one of us, our director, is over there. There's other county staff, Mr. Zerby, Mr. Fish, with Rhodes from MCC. He's not from the county, but it's
Right. Great. Great. I think how about everyone online? Anyone not mentioned online that would like to state your name?
Tom Pollock here, Monroe County DOT.
Thank you.
Gary Griffin, Monroe Community Hospital.
You?
Patty Utaro, Monroe County Library System.
Hey, thank you.
Rebecca Hartman, Medical Examiner's Office.
Thank you for joining us.
Michael Wall from the airport.
Mike,
Ken Forney from Information Services.
Pat Meredith, Monroe County Parks, Tom Morrissey, Monroe County Parks, and Bob Kiley, Monroe County Parks.
great, thank you.
Nancy Padilla, Public Safety.
Thank you, Nancy.
Corey Brown, Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Corey.
Jennifer Curley, Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Yishin, are you able to take a snapshot of the online participants? So you have a record of it. So I think that would help Kim out.
We'll also have the recording, so I can take it off
Oh.
that, and I can also take it off of the Zoom registrations.
There you go. Perfect. All right. Great. All right. So I think that is roll call. And first item on the agenda is announcements and communications. Are there any board members with announcements or communications?
I will add last week in our planning board meeting, we mentioned about Monroe County is kicking off the climate action plan, and the upcoming workshop is a virtual. It's in March 15th, and they have two sections. One is at noon and one's on 6 p.m. So we can so encourage everyone to share this event and to join in. And I'll pass out the flyer again in case you're interested. And we also have another public workshop coming out is regarding our countywide active transportation plan. And this is a host in person, and it's on March 22nd from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. This will be an open house. And the public will be able to join in, and we will be able to share some of the findings we have for the county active transportation plan. And solicit public input on the investment priority and the facility preference for biking and walking. And I would all the share the.
What is that, Yishin?
It's a countywide active transportation plan. When is it? It's a March 22nd.
March 22nd at 4 p.m.
I can share the So you can see, so this is the flyer. So if you join online, you can check on this and go to Monroe County CIP.com and you can get all the information. And also feel free to contact me. I will leave my email address in the chat.
Great,
He
thank
does
you.
have a flyer going around on that too, so
Awesome.
you can take one.
Can we include both of these in the minutes?
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Any other announcements from staff, board members, departments? Hearing none, I'd like to open up the public hearing on the proposed 2024 through 2029 capital improvement program. And with that, the public is allowed to give feedback. And later on, we will leave that record open for public comments until March 16th. But Rochelle, take it away.
Shen, we'll pull up the presentation and okay, so this is the proposed 24-29 CIP. We started this process in the fall and had met frequently with county departments, finance, the county executive and his team. And this is the proposal to the county planning board. Next slide, please. Where you can find this online is at monroecounty.gov at the Planning Services website. So the proposed CIP is posted on the website. And while you're there, I encourage you to look around at other events and things, information at Planning Services. A lot of there's links to our active transportation plan and county comprehensive plan and things about the broadband study as well. Next slide, please. So we use the term CIP, stands for Capital Improvement Program. So begs the question, what does that mean? Basically, a capital project includes large projects that are funded by either long-term debt, non-debt sources out of our operating budget. So we put them all together because we get a picture for all the county decision makers about what's coming up in the next 6 years. And then we'll focus on the first year of the CIP, which is 2024. So when we talk about large projects, we're talking about projects that have a certain period of probable usefulness. So it's not a one-off thing. It's not like a festival that maybe costs a lot but is over. It has to have a certain length of usefulness, and it has to. There are certain details, and this is all in the charter about certain things can only be paid for when a new building, for example, is first constructed. But it's not for ongoing maintenance like that. Next slide, please. Can we drill down a little bit into administrative standards? These are guidelines. Oh, one back. Yeah, thank you. So if it's a project that we're going to bond for, the cost of the project should exceed $100,000 and have a useful life of 5 years. If we're going to use cash capital, it should cost less than $250,000 and have a useful life of less than 5 years. We can pay for equipment and motor vehicles out of this kind of funding, but not passenger vehicles. Next slide, please. So through the report, you'll see different kinds of funding referred to. A C refers to county funding, county revenues such as property and sales tax. A D refers to district charges like the Pure Waters charges. E is for enterprise funds, which are direct user fees, which are used by the airport, solid waste, and the hospital. Then there's S and F for state, federal, and even P for private. Now, some of these letters C, D, and E might have a C after them. So you might see CC or DC or EC, and that stands for cash, meaning that the project will be funded out of current operating funds. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of every department that we call our CIP departments, 15 departments in all, and the piece of the pie that they are asking for funding in the total CIP. So, for example, in the lower right, their Department of Environmental Services, Pure Waters, that has the biggest piece of the pie, 24% of the overall budget. However, the devil's in the details in that this is all district funding. So looking at the top four, and it will start with Pure Waters. The second one, Highway and Bridges, that is 18% of the total CIP. 78% of that is county funding, but there's also federal, state, and private funding. Monroe Community College in green over there, 14% of the total, or 13% of the whole budget, but that's split 50-50 between the county and the state. And then there's aviation, 10% of the budget, which is mostly federal money, and also enterprise funds and state funds. Next slide, please. This just shows pretty much the same information, except combining everything by program area. For example, public safety in the upper right, in the red pie there, that's combining medical examiners, sheriff, and the public safety departments. And also a whole look at the transportation sector. Next slide, please. And then kind of a variation on what we've been talking about, looking at the total CIP in terms of the different funding sources. So about half of it is on the right in the blue is county funding. 33% of that will be bonded. 17% is county cash. So this gives you the breakdown of each individual funding source. Next, thank you. That we're going to now look at charts and tables that compare county spending in the adopted program compared to what we're proposing now, and then each CIP department. So this is just a little cheat sheet about what the colors and symbols mean. Anything in blue is referring to the adopted program, the 2023-2028 CIP, which was adopted in July. Anything in red, bar wise, is what we're proposing. If they're striped, we're looking at the 6-year program total instead of the annual totals. And then when we look at the numbers of exact funding, if it's red, that means it's greater than in the adopted CIP. If the number's green, it means it's, I'm sorry, if it's red, it's less than what's in the adopted CIP. If it's green, it's more. What's proposed is more than in the adopted CIP. And if it's black, it's the same. And there'll be red arrows, which indicates a scheduling change. And italicized projects are new. Next slide. So what this illustrates, it's comparing for each county department, each CIP department that uses county funds, the difference between the adopted and the proposed. And what this illustrates is that, let's say, look at the total on the far right, some projects drop out. So maybe a large county project funded with county funds dropped out, meaning it was funded in 2023, and that's the end of its presence in the CIP. And also you see that some projects, so this is comparing the adopted CIP total with the proposed CIP total. There's some changes because of these large projects dropping out, or because as projects approach the next year, we get more accuracy about what the project is going to cost. New funding sources come online. This happens with the transportation sector and the airport specifically. As you get closer to the current years, the funding shifts from anticipated county spending to federal and state spending. Now, we're just looking at the budget year in this slide, and it's comparing what we thought the budget year would be, what we thought 2024 would be in the adopted CIP compared to what we're proposing. So in some cases, it's higher than we thought. In some cases, it's lower than we thought. Again, it recognizes more accuracy or changes in estimating the cost of a project. It might reflect changes in priorities, changes in needs, a rebalancing of the whole 6-year program. That's the point of a 6-year program, is to be able to get a look at the overall expenses anticipated in the coming years. So that's just a general look. Now we can drill down into each department. This first slide is about the Department of Information Services. Basically, the takeaway at this level is red and green everywhere. That means there's a lot of funding changes. It tells you whether the proposed program is more or less than the adopted program. To get an idea of the magnitude of that change, it's literally best to have the proposed and the adopted CIPs in front of you and look at any particular project and year that you're interested in. However, having said that, if you have a question today, I do have all of this quickly accessible in my notes. So just feel free to ask questions. The medical examiners, they do have a new project this year. That's something we focus on. New projects usually drop into the CIP in the last year, in this case, 2029. But sometimes, as in this case, something happens and it has to be addressed immediately. And so that's what's going on with the HVAC upgrades at the medical examiners. Next slide's about Monroe Community College. What you see with those red arrows, you see the Applied Technology Center, the STEM edition moving up, and to compensate for that, services for student renovations moving out. So sometimes it's a straight schedule change. It's exact money is in the adopted. Sometimes the amount of money changes. And there's a new project, which looking way out, the last line there, the new project, the Campus Welcome Center. We do have Quint here to answer any questions about MCC, if anyone has any right now. The Monroe Community Hospital program. Another example, the front loader is a new project, and this is where we drill down and figure out, is this the kind of expense that can be funded in the capital program? And it can. And so it dropped in this year. They fixed it for as long as they could, but it reached the end of its life. Next slide, please. The Monroe County Library System. The library system is an association of autonomous local public libraries. So what we fund in the CIP it's limited to system-wide projects like the library system automation that I'm sure everyone has used, where you can check out a book from one library and pick it up at another library. You can arrange that online, but to actually get that book from one library to the other library, you need a truck. And so that's what the second project is about, the fleet replacement. Aviation, please. Next slide. Very good. This is a classic program that has enterprise funding, state and federal funding, which changes year to year. So that first project, we can see that the money moved from 25 to 24 next budget year, and also more money became available from the federal government. Next slide, please. The airport has a fairly large program. Now let's just scooch right on to Pure Waters. There we go. Not a lot of changes this year. One new project, replacement of heavy equipment. But everything else is pretty much the same. Even the changes in numbers, the magnitude of those changes, the red and green is not that much. Next slide for Pure Waters. There are three new projects we're looking at in the outer years. Next, facilities. Some of the changes, like towards the top between general HVAC and the next one, the new one, general building envelope. It's just a matter of fine tuning how we are putting them in the CIP and funding them to get the best borrowing situation possible. So some things have a different probable life than others. So if we can separate those out, that affects the bond rating or the bond interest rate. So really there's a new project there with the red and green in those two rows, but in the adopted CIP, it was just one project with the same cost. Next slide, solid waste. Getting more clear about the recycling center and resource recovery facility improvements. So we had to increase the anticipated cost compared to last year. Parks sort of went the other direction. A lot of building and structures, money came from other sources, so we were able to reduce our request for that. And there's a couple of new projects relative to the golf courses, which have become extremely popular, more popular this year as people are spending more time outside. The next slide is about the zoo. New projects as the zoo redevelopment is going on. Also, facility and grounds decrease for a similar reason that I mentioned with parks, money coming from other places, so we don't need so much money out of county borrowing. The next slides are about transportation, first highway and bridges, and then we'll talk about traffic engineering. In the first two rows, it's green, meaning that, like I had said, it's more than it was last year, but in this case, the change is that the funding source. So it was county funding, and we anticipated borrowing for culvert replacement and milling, resurfacing, and recycling, but we've been able to change that to county cash, so it will come out of the operating budget. Couple of new projects related to highway preventive maintenance, where we get good federal support for those projects. Next slide, please. Taylor Road Bridge, kind of as an example of the flux that county projects or transportation projects are in, depending on when you get federal funding. And so, we knew this project had to happen. And we didn't know when this federal and state funding would be available. So that and just rebalancing the program as a whole kind of talks to all of the schedule changes. Next slide. Lots of schedule changes for highways and bridges. Traffic engineering is pretty stable. There is a new project, traffic signal and system replacements. And next we have our public safety program. The actual dollar amount changes are not very much. but the schedule changes, things have moved up a lot to adjust needs. And the sheriff's office, the last department, the sheriff's office, very stable. Increased the price a little bit for vehicles in the outer years. So that is a quick summary of the 15 departments, CIP departments. That date on this last slide for comment should read March 16th, not March 24th. That's a typo. And if you have any comments or questions on the CIP, please contact my colleague, Pat Gooch. He's a senior planner in the planning division.
Great, thank you, Rochelle. Are there any members of the public that have questions on the presentation? Are there any board members or staff members that have questions on the presentation?
Yeah, a question that I have, and I'm sure just a technical question, the difference between heavy equipment and light equipment. I mean, I can see something in my mind, but that may be incorrect.
It is not what you think it is.
Okay,
It is defined in local finance law. Literally, it's dollars.
Oh,
Light equipment with a cost, I'll hit heavy equipment. Heavy equipment with a cost greater than $30,000, you can bond for over 15 years. Light equipment, we do between 15,000 and 30. That's 10-year bonding.
yeah, it's not what I thought. Thank you.
I had a question. This is for transportation. So on East River Road, Calkins, Thomas Ave, Clover, Phillips Road, Lehigh Station Road, Harris Road, Trolley Boulevard, and Linden Ave, the CIP says bicycle facilities will be considered. And I'm just wondering why there's not a commitment to including bicycle lanes or infrastructure in these projects.
Hi, this is Tom Pollock, DOT. I can answer that. So as you might know, we have a complete streets policy at DOT. We do go through that as part of every capital project on this list. It has a lot of different things based on the type of project, what the scope of the project is, where it is, what the road is classified as. And as some of you may know, in this county, it is actually up to the town to install certain things outside of the shoulder-to-shoulder width of the road. So we approach the towns early on when we're scoping these projects, and then again when the design starts, to kind of get some concurrence on what they might be willing to partner with us on. So each project is really individually different. We have public input opportunities for each one, but we are installing our first bike lanes actually this year on Elmwood Avenue. So that'll be a start for us, something new. And we'll certainly consider them in the future. We're putting together a bicycle lane policy right now. Actually, it's not finalized yet, but it'll be going into effect this year.
Thank you so much for considering a bicycle lane policy. I'm curious, maybe the legal staff can answer this question. Can the legislature codify that policy or a different policy as it relates to bicycle lanes or complete streets? I mean, it has been done in other counties and municipalities.
I would say that's a layered answer of codifying. Certainly other counties have adopted complete street policies. Certainly that's done throughout New York State. But I guess it would be a more technical answer to discuss what codified means. But in adopting a complete streets policy, certainly other counties across New York State has done so.
Okay. When you say that municipalities, do they have final say? So for example, if you were to say to Henrietta, look, we want to put bicycle lanes on Calkins Road, does Henrietta effectively and legally have veto power?
From the DOT's perspective, no, not necessarily. We always try to work with the individual towns and villages But ultimately, it's a county road, so the county highway superintendent is responsible for making the ultimate final decision.
And as it pertains to bicycle facilities, do these add a lot of cost to these projects? And my understanding is the state is now making funding available for complete streets.
Yes, bicycle facilities do actually add more costs than some people might realize to our projects, not only in the form of pavement markings, symbols on the road, but also signs. So there needs to be bicycle lane signs and also no standing signs. Because certainly if you mark a dedicated bicycle facility on a road, you don't want a parked vehicle or a standing vehicle in the bike lane. So those are some of the things that we're looking into right now as we create a more formal policy, trying to figure out for the future how much more additional costs this would really add if we're to look further into some of these design changes in our future projects.
Okay, well, I really hope that bicycle facilities are considered very seriously, and that whatever policy is developed, that it's not easy to say no to bicycle facilities. And I certainly hope that the legislature will get involved in this as well, because I know that there's great interest in complete streets policies and in Monroe County. And I also know it's a hot topic for the active transportation plan. So I know that there's a lot in the works, and I do appreciate your work on this as well. And I really hope that this issue is prioritized. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Legislator Barnhart. Any other questions from board members? Again, opening up to the public. Any questions from the public? And if you do have a question, I can remind you that you can send that in writing. The record will be held open until March 16th, our next meeting. We will close it then and hopefully hear more comments on the CIP. So if hearing no other questions, I will close the public hearing and hold the record open till March 16th. So next item on the agenda is approval of the March 2nd, 2023 meeting minutes. They were emailed to you in your packet. Need a motion for those, please. So moved. Thank you, Orlin.
Second.
Thank you. Great. Any discussion on those minutes? Revisions, changes? There are a couple typos, but I left one. There was a lot to it. So a lot of information in that packet. Hearing no other discussion, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? Thank you. That's your best. Great. Next item is the presentation by the Department of Environmental Services.
All right, thank you. So putting the slides up. We were asked at the last meeting to present on pure waters and facilities projects.
So we have Sean Murphy from DES here today. Sorry.
That's okay. The man behind the mask. So I'll explain a little bit about our process. This is going to be very brief, but then mainly being able to open it up for questions if necessary. So on the next slide, you'll see that we keep an active spreadsheet beyond just a 6-year planning effort. We go out 15 years on our projects under the direction of Director Garland here. And we have 4 main areas that we look at. You'll see them on the screen there. The top is pure waters projects. We have environmental and facilities management projects, solid waste projects, and then we also represent other departments or deliver other departments' capital projects like public safety or the jail, MCH, those other areas. So we keep track of money that's in their budgets, but we still keep track of the projects in and of themselves. So again, we like to have a planning horizon that is well beyond the 10 years so that we can keep track, because we're dealing large projects, multi-million-dollar projects. And certainly in consultation with finance, these projects move up and back, forward and backward in order to help finance keep their bonding capacity at a reasonable level. Another thing we do in the spreadsheet, and this is a simple Excel spreadsheet, but we keep copious notes on the bottom about what's represented in each different project. So I manage the spreadsheet. If I'm hit by the proverbial bus, somebody can pick this up and be able to have an idea of what we're thinking for, 10, 15 years out. Plus, I hope not to be here in 10 or 15 years, just so you know. Just so you know. Yeah, exactly. Next slide, please. So just to explain a little bit how we develop the cost, because it does come up, Legislator Hebert asked a lot about escalation. So what we do in our spreadsheet on the first area there, you can see, for instance, this is the Westfall building, 111 Westfall. We had in the lower left-hand corner, a facilities plan that was done in 2018, recognizing this is going to be a whole bunch of years out. We account for things like escalation, and in that little circled area, that 1.4258 is 12 years of escalation at 3%. So we do build escalation into these costs so that when we get out to actually build a project, we can have a better handle on where things are at. The next real thin line there, that's our elevator project. Again, we inventory where we stand with elevators. There's about 90 elevators throughout the county. Recognizing that we can't just do them as a one-off, we created a capital project for that, which is actually in the 23, we got some money, and 24, there'll be some additional funds. But we keep track of where those elevators are and prioritize and what year they should be based on history, need, criticality for operational things such as public safety building for the sheriff. They have prisoner transport, those types of elevators. We need to make sure those are always functional and operational for the individual departments. So what we use as tools, again, are the planning level opinions of probable costs that are developed by consultants when they develop a plan, like say this one in 2018, and we'll put some escalation, some additional costs on there because quite frankly, consultants are looking at, well, what's the cost to build it? But they don't look at all the other costs that go into it, the cost of bonding, our soft costs, some of the other costs that may be incurred. So we make sure to incorporate those into our estimates. The middle slide shows a little bit of prioritization that happens sometimes in these reports. The list priorities based on critical need, equipment that's going to fail, or functional needs inside the buildings. We take that into account as we're putting together our projects. And then at some point in the future, as projects become more going closer to construction, and we do come back and ask for more money, we'll actually then develop or engage a professional estimating firm, come up with a more detailed estimate. We'll actually do a takeoff from documents to determine what the costs are going to be more real time. And then in the case of the CDC that we just talked about, there we actually had bids that came back. So those were bid certain bid prices, and we felt a lot more comfortable with that process. So going on to the next slide for Pure Waters. There's a couple different things that we look at. There's the cash capital projects that you can see in the upper portion there. There's about $2.5 million, for instance, in the Rochester Pure Waters District general capital. That would be something where we had to replace an individual pump in a pump station or replace a couple sections of line on a sewer. And those are done through a 5-year planning effort. The operations folks and maintenance folks get together and create a fairly extensive spreadsheet that identify where the needs are and the priority of those needs. And then using this money that's provided on an annual basis, they're able to knock out projects on a routine basis. But then we do have more discrete projects, which are listed a little bit lower. So a couple examples of those would be like the Northwest Quadrant. You can see in 25, we've got $2.4 million identified, with another $6 million in 26, another $6 million in 27. Again, going back to how can we kind of flatten this out, not ask for a whole bunch of money at once? Is there a way to be able to phase the project to a certain extent? And sometimes, I don't know if you can see it, but going down a little bit further, an example would be the Northwest Quadrant primary treatment. We've got 600,000 in 26, and then 2.4 million in 27. So in 26, we'd actually do the design work. That would then help us come up with a better, more detailed estimate on what the cost would be. And then if necessary, could adjust that 2.4 million that's going to be in the following year in terms of a capital fund. And then down towards the bottom, you'll see on this list, projects that don't show up in the current CIP. A couple examples here would be some yard piping up at Van Laer, all chemical storage things at Van Laer. So again, the operators and the maintenance folks keep track of larger projects, not so much the ongoing 5-year planning, but what are the larger projects that are on the horizon beyond the 6-year program that we're in? And we keep track of those costs and put them in the CIP. And then if something comes up where we have the capability of bringing it forward, we can do that, right? Because we have that, all that information and planning ready to go. So I think there was a question about Pure Waters. I don't know if there's anything specific anybody has about Pure Waters, the programs and take there that you want to talk about? No? Okay. We do a similar thing in facilities, the next slide, where we have some general improvements that go on. You know, there's a couple $100,000 or $1 million will be put into the budget every couple of years. That's to take care of individual HVAC units or cooling towers on a particular building. But then we do have larger efforts that go into play. An example of that would be the county office building reconstruction, which actually fell off the project. But there's a situation where we're replacing the entire HVAC system in the building as a whole. You remember a couple of years ago, we came and got some money for work on the 5th floor here in the server room. That's a very discrete project that we could identify that we have some finite financing for. Here's an example where looking forward down at the bottom, there's a general roof replacement that we've identified and some other activities that may happen a couple years out. You know, roofs, you replace them every 25 to 40 years. So we want to make sure that as the life cycle comes into play on particular buildings, we can go out and replace them on an individual basis if they're not part of a larger project. So for instance, in this building, when we came back and got money for this building, we included the roof in that building. So that's being taken care of. But if we have another particular area we have to do, we can cover that under this general fund. Now, I think somebody asked a specific question about Westfall as far as this. So you can see Westfall is listed in here. We've identified $2.8 million in 2028 to commence the design so that we can get a better handle on where we are with the actual work that needs to be done and how much it's going to cost. There's 8.5 that's being requested in 2029. And then going out to 30 and 31, there would be additional funding that would be necessary to complete the entire project, because it is a multi-million-dollar project. That building was built in 1964, you know, so by the time we get to 2029, it's going to be 65 years old, and I can attest to what you feel like at 65. It's over 210,000 square feet. It houses human services and public health, so it's a very critical building for us. And before we get to that point, we are going to be doing a space utilization for human services to just make sure that the people that are in that building and the facilities that we need are actually adequate for what we're trying to do. So we're not just going to go renovate the whole building and then find out it's only half full, something to that effect. We make sure that we coordinate physical activities that are going on with the actual functional need of the building itself.
Will you need swing space for that if you're over, say, 75% full or 80% full? Is that something that you'll consider?
Yeah, swing space is an important thing that we consider in projects. So again, that's a combination of own space that we have or lease space that we'll have to swing people in and out. And that's one of the main considerations, for instance, in the county office building. As we're doing total replacements in HVAC on a particular floor, we may just do a quarter of a floor. We're going to swing those people out or work with the departments to have people work from home during those time frames. That's all part of the execution part of the project.
Do you have space available? Does the county have space available that they, or are you pretty full everywhere?
Well, so there's space, but it's convenient space. You're talking about for swing space or just in general?
Yeah, just throughout in general. Just in other words, you're leasing some space, I suspect, right?
Yep.
So
a situation would be this building. We're packed to the gills in this building now that we're bringing three departments back in that used to be in lease space next door.
Oh.
So we will be pretty built out here. Part of what we're going to be looking at though is some of the space people that are coming into this building, do they become part of another group that we relocate someplace else?
Gotcha.
And that is part of conjunction with some lease space we have that may be underutilized now. We don't want to be paying lease costs for a bunch of underutilized space.
Right.
So yeah, there's a combination of space utilization planning that goes on, physical asset we have, leasing that we deal with the real property folks with. Yeah, just a number of departments get involved, and then obviously finance. Bob's always telling us what we can't do because we can't afford it.
So are we constantly reviewing our space utilization? Is realty, I guess, what is that department? Real estate?
Real property.
Real property.
Yeah.
It's usually done in conjunction with either DHS or and I know in the past, sometimes planning, but usually DES and real property work on spatialization.
Yeah. A lot of it falls down into when leases are up, space is necessary, those types of
Sure.
things. Or we're in a space where somebody gets kicked out because the client that owns the building wants to do something else, we have to find new space, so. Yep.
So the Westfall building project that you mentioned, is that a study in 2028 then?
No, the 2028, so the study was actually done.
Study was done.
Done was
It was done on the
2018.
left there.
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
We have an estimate that went along with that.
okay.
That didn't include certain things, so we added those costs into it. So this
Got it.
2.8 would be the design work to get
Okay.
started.
Got it.
And generally, we'll take 20% of a project cost, included for the design, planning, those types of things, done with the construction being in the subsequent years. And then sometimes we try to phase construction over multiple years if we can. In a situation with the ATC, you may remember that was over multiple years.
Yeah.
That guy actually got accelerated because if you waited the multiple years, you really couldn't start construction until you had all the funding in place.
Yeah.
So that was all accelerated so that we could get that project underway.
Is just to, I didn't mean to hold you up or stuff.
No, that's it, pretty much so. Yep.
Okay, so any of the new board members have questions on the acronyms in the, say, Pure Waters, you know, Roncoit Bay, and the Northwest Quadrant, the Gates Tri Ogden, Rochester Pure Waters, any of that?
In the
Yeah.
introduction to that department.
Okay, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so each district has to maintain its own cash, right? Money can't transfer. Veronica Bay can't pay for something in Rochester unless there's
Right.
some agreement that's already in place for that.
Right.
And we're very cognizant when bonding is approved. So for instance, bonding is approved for City Place. That doesn't mean we can take some extra money and go over and do work at county office building. Bonding is very specific to the project. And, you know, we make sure to watch out for that also.
Great.
All right.
Well said. Any other questions for Sean?
Okay, thank you.
Great, nice job. Thank you. All right, so the next item on the agenda is we're going to talk about the capital vote and the capital priority vote. So next week, we're going to be voting on, next week, we're going to be voting on not only approval of the capital improvement program, but also in the year 2024, you'll be issued a list of those projects and you need to rank them, you know, 1 to 5. And like I mentioned last week, try to equal it out because you end up mathematically, your ones end up, you know, strong. That is, if you bullet vote and, you know, put 1s in certain group and then 5s elsewhere, then yeah, okay, I'll agree with you mathematically. You're giving your 1s a better strength, but all your other projects get pretty much get lowered, you know, together. If you assign everything 5s or everything 2s, everything's just going to move up too. It's you know, and they're going to take an average. So it's all relative. Keep that in mind. So Rochelle, you have a discussion on this?
So,
And actually Kim had mentioned she had some sheets to hand out.
yeah, so these are instructions for how to, this is going around, how to use the CIP app to submit your priority vote. So I encourage you to do this because then it's all automated. However, if you would prefer a paper ballot, I have them and we'll pass those around too. Or you might, you know, enjoy having the paper ballot while you're online, but you still go online and cast your votes. One thing I will point out is that the paper ballot, you can see the funding for the project, where it's coming from, county, enterprise, et cetera. But it doesn't break out cash funding. So if that's one of your criteria, you know, we don't have a set list of criteria for the planning board to consider. Like we might, if you're looking at a proposal per project, everyone is looking at the same criteria and ranking it. In the planning board, we don't do it that way for these projects because you all represent different interests. So you might be more interested in projects in the city, or might be more concerned about Pure Waters or the airport, whatever. This is up to you to figure out how you want to prioritize which, top 20 are your top 20% projects, which are your bottom 20% projects. I'm starting to understand what you're talking about with the differentiate. Not quite, maybe by next year, year two. That this is helpful in that respect too. Your 2024 projects, it will show you where the funding is coming from. And if it matters to you, like this little cheat sheet I made, the pink is the ones that are cash projects, whether it's county cash or enterprise cash. So you might want to, if that matters to you, that it's cash and not debt, you might want to look at that too. If you have any questions, of course, contact me or Pat. If you do it by paper, we ask you to sign it and then mail it back or scan it and email it. And we need those. Oh, I hope I have the date right on that.
Yes, and the directions due 3/22. No, that's not right.
No, the directions are, I don't know. Where am I? The calendar in Israel is different. This is the problem. I don't know. That's what happened. So
that's the day before the meeting next week.
yeah, by the 15th, so that I have a day to compile it.
Yeah.
So Rochelle here is now March 22nd, 15th.
Yeah, 15th. Thank you. I was looking at our March 23rd meeting, but that is,
Right.
We do have that scheduled for a regular planning board meeting. I haven't heard of any action items for that meeting yet, but there might be. Okay.
So Wednesday, same time, noon, 5 o'clock.
Oh, that day,
Yeah.
Wednesday, 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock, 3:15. You can get your priority ballots done.
Any questions about how to do this priority vote? Just call, since we can walk through it. That's it.
Great. Any other business? Hearing none, we'll see you March 16th here at 3 p.m. I understand there's going to be a presentation.
Yes.
Right, who's coming in? Two?
MCC.
MCC and DOT. Okay, very good. And at the end of that, we'll be voting on the CIP as well as comparing the priority votes that came in the day before.
Yeah, that's the other thing about the priority votes. So when I get them all, I will, I have an average and I'll put them in priority order and I will give them to everybody. I'll pass them out. And then we could talk about how, it's not mathematical. It's just like, I'm really not comfortable with the library being last or whatever. We can talk through how you want to change priorities.
Yeah, historically, we have done that, like when they built the new water plant out on the east side, came in very low. We ended up moving it up. It seemed like a public health priority.
And when the opioid crisis started to really take off, we moved the medical examiners equipment up.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's also kind of signaling a, that kind of concern about things. And the use for it is if the county legislature ever was in the position that they had to decide, like, look, we just can't do all this, that helps them to know what the county planning board thinks.
Yeah.
And they take that into account, but we have never done that to my knowledge.
Yeah, that's a winner.
Which is all credit to our CFO. Sure.
It is published on the one that goes to the legislature, and it's on like the second or third sheet in, and then I don't think the numbers are there. It's just a list, correct?
It's just a list.
Yeah. Right. All right. Any motion for adjournment? Thank you, Mr. Garland. Any seconds?
Second.
No. Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
I apologize, Chair. I didn't change my calendar. Yeah, 3:30. I do it. I saw you. Save it at 3:30.